Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Friday, August the 16th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined on this Thursday afternoon live taping, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, joint practices are officially over. How are we feeling?
Feeling good, feeling fulfilled by these joint practices. It's already been a day for ya boy over here. Just go, all football today, starting at the bright and early time of 7:30 this morning. Went on some Seattle sports talk to talk Seahawks Titans, and then
I think some blue collar folks are going to give you a hard time for 7:30 being bright and early, but I know what you mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, since 7:30, I've been all football.
For us Gen Zers, 7:30 is bright and early. Let me tell you.
This is correct. This is very correct. I had to. 7:30 is for me is like a thing where I have to plan it out the night before. It's like, I need to go to bed a little bit earlier because it's a whole thing. Because
our 7:30 is the working man's 4:30. If we're being 100% honest,
and like our Gen Z's like bedtime at 9:30 is like 12:30.
Midnight. Pre or post midnight. Yeah. If you're getting up at 7:30, that's the determining factor as to whether or not you go to bed before or after midnight. We've got a big show. Yes, you've been all football all day. I've been all football all day. We are on the heels of two Titans and Seahawks joint practices, and we are going to break all of it down for you today. So much ground to cover. It's going to be one of our best shows in a while. I can already tell you that for sure right now. Going to go over the overview, our general thoughts on the 2 days of joint practice. Who won, who lost, who was the most important player out there, or maybe not out there. Some thoughts on that. Going to give you all of our notes on what went down the past 2 days. Anything of particular importance from practice that we saw happen that you may have missed, we'll run it down for you. We're going to hear from a number of different folks in the clips. Will Levis giving his perfume introduction, which we will spend a brief moment on against my will. I'm going to talk about some of the receivers. I think today I am prepared to make a couple of very strong statements, and the chief amongst them is the fact that the wide receiver sweepstake is over. That competition is over. We're going to talk about it and why that is the case. You're going to hear folks continue to talk about that like it's still a competition for the next 2 weeks. It's not. That is wrapped up as of today, in my opinion. There are other two key position groups that the Titans have not wrapped up in any way, still very much up in the air, and I think in not so good of a way. We'll talk about that. And then we are going to get to some news with producer JT, everything you need to know ahead of this weekend's preseason game, all that and a lot more, including, by the way, the drawing for our second giveaway. We have a club seat with one of your names on it. If you have not submitted your entry yet, I am sorry to tell you it's too late. We've already got the entries locked in here at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. The bag return, bag of names, JT. At some point in today's episode, we'll be drawing from that bag. So if you entered, and you know who you are, if you entered, you'll need to stick around for today's episode until we decide to draw. You never know. It could be in the next 10 minutes. It could be an hour from now when we decide to do that drawing. And if you don't catch it with your own ears, then we're gonna have to give it to somebody else. You got to go hunting.
Like we said last week. If you're in line, stay in line.
If you are in line, stay in line. This is for true listeners of the Hot Read podcast, not folks just trying to make a quick buck and get a ticket into to see the preseason game this weekend. Before we do any of these things, JT, we got to do some housekeeping here. If you're with us live today on a Thursday evening, we appreciate you being here. Do us a couple of favors. First of all, make sure you're watching on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. That's Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. Find this live stream there. And in the comment section, you can join Glory Day Sports. And we would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions heading into preseason week number 2. Glory Day saying the Monarch slander will not go unnoticed. That is right, JT. Our friend here on the 440 Podcast Network, Braden Gall, and I were chatting today. He ended up doing a media shoe poll. He took pictures of 4 of our shoes, the 4 he found most noteworthy. Mine were on there. I was wearing the Dad Force 1s out there today. If you're not familiar with these shoes, it's my best friend, my childhood best friend, sent them to me in the mail the week of my daughter's birth and said, here's your first pair of dad shoes. They're the classic, chunky, just ugly dad mowing shoes, the ones that turn green because you wear them out in the lawn. The Nike Air Monarchs, they are preposterous. They are so bad that they're good. And JT does not quite understand that. But apparently half the people on the internet do, because as of my last check. The Dad Force ones are at 50% in that poll. Folks get it.
The shoe equivalent to Ryan Tannehill is a great comp.
That's honestly kind of harsh for Ryan. I would say it's like, it gives me kind of like Russell Wilson vibes. Does that make sense? Where it's kind of like
maybe awkward, Kirk Cousins,
awkward weirdo. Dad,
I would go Kirk
funky
Cousins.
Bunch. Like that's kind of the vibe, I think. Kirk Cousins? Yeah, Kirk Cousins is a good one. I think Kirk Cousins is a great one. Listen,
however,
they're very comfortable.
That
I understand where the dads are getting it from.
That poll is absolutely, it's a sham. It's a travesty. It's unbelievable. Mac Jones, as James says.
Oh, no.
Those are the Mac Jones shoes.
Tough. That's really tough.
That poll today is a sham. It's a travesty. TD by far had the best shoe game, as he always does, followed up by Braden's. I thought Braden's was second. I'm just, but I'm not really going to go on this tirade because I'm very glad that my shoes were not included. I was about to say,
Braden told me yours are dead last because you were wearing some beater slip-ons today.
Oh, but I didn't realize that we were out there having a shoe competition.
The shoe day memo?
Maybe that's on Braden, that Braden's paying more attention to the shoe game out there than the practice that's actually going on. But
that was my comment. I was standing next to Teresa Walker when he walked by, and it was like, well, I'm glad he's paying attention to the important things out here at joint practices. He was looking at our shoes. He also, by the way, I was talking to Braden about we had a conversation that's unrelated to football, but he came to realize that he thinks I am out of touch with my generation, Gen Z, which is probably fair, and I take mostly as a compliment. I like to put it as I'm in touch enough with Gen Z to realize I don't want much of anything to do with them. He also claims to be out of touch with his generation. He's a millennial, but he prefers to be a Gen Xer. So I guess we're both transplants into different generations. But I told him, JT, you are my senior Gen Z correspondent. Whenever I need Gen Z information, you are the person I go to. So congrats on your new title. That's a big one for you.
I'm glad that I can be, I guess. The correspondent to my employer, you mega boomer. I feed you the information that you don't.
He goes right from Gen Z to boomer. I can't just be like a Gen X. That's not allowed. Okay,
nope, not allowed.
All right. Well, enough dilly-dallying. Let's talk about what actually happened at Titans joint practice. And again, make sure you're liking, subscribing, hit that thumbs up button if you're watching with us on YouTube. We appreciate that. If you're watching on Twitter, hit that retweet button. Help us get as many live eyeballs on this as possible. And again, we'd love to hear your thoughts over in the comment section. Let's start with an overview of the joint practice and our thoughts on the quarterbacks, JT. The first question is, who do you think won the joint practices? Do you feel like somebody won the joint practices?
It's tough. I want to say that you went into today's practice kind of 50-50, feeling like both offenses really didn't do a lot of anything yesterday, and the defenses definitely won the day. And then today, I think you had the offenses start, bounce back and have a hot start, both of them, both Treylon Burks getting that big catch, and then DK Metcalf kind of going all the way down the field and catching a bomb from Geno Smith. If I had to give an edge, I would say that through the course of today's practice, Seattle kind of came out ahead, both in their with their offensive line group and their secondary group. I think that is who really won the day on either side, was that Seattle defense. And so I think I would give them a slight edge, but that's not really saying much. I don't think there was a clear and cut decisive winner. It was pretty close, but I'd have to probably give the edge to Seattle.
Yeah, not that it actually matters, but I would agree. I think on the whole, the 2 days, Seattle looked, the way I would put it is more specifically than just Seattle was the better team. They won the 2 days. To me, they looked like relatively similarly matched teams in terms of talent, and Seattle looked like they were further along in their team development, which tracks logically because Seattle is a much less new team. They've got a lot of guys that have played multiple years together. The Titans are in flux with, obviously both teams in flux with their head coach, but in terms of their personnel on either side of the ball, a lot less transition over there. So I kind of think that checked out, but I didn't see one team that was dramatically more talented just on paper than the other. I also think it's important to note the Titans, and we didn't really talk about this going in, and in hindsight, I feel like it was obvious. The Titans were missing a handful of really key players that I think mattered a lot. And we're going to talk about this more when we get to the receiver conversation, but not having DeAndre Hopkins out there, it shuffles the deck in a way that I think presents an interesting conversation. If we think forward to the season, the thought experiment of, okay, what does this Titans offense look like if they're missing this receiver versus this receiver versus this receiver of their starters? I think that DeAndre Hopkins is far and away clearly the glue guy, the piece that if you're missing him, he may not be your most talented receiver. That may be Calvin Ridley, but I think missing DeAndre Hopkins changes the math for the way that the Titans can operate as a receiving core in the biggest way. So I'll expand on that thought in a minute. And then for the receivers on the Seahawks side, yes, they looked good, and we know DK Metcalf is a good player. By the way, Jake Bobo, if you don't know who he is, get familiar with his game. Baller, very good player. Going into his second year, a steal that they found in the draft. Was he a 6th rounder last year? 5th, 6th
something
rounder,
like that. I mean, I'm sorry to say to Titans fans, but
where's he out of? Is he UCLA?
UCLA, I think.
Yeah,
so.
I think
one
so.
One of those Western California schools, wherever they
He's a day 3 UCLA player that actually panned out, unlike another
player
we might talk about later today. But
I was going to say that if there was one thing I was going to get done this week was I was going to further the campaign for Jake Bobo, the Jake Bobo heads out there. I was going to lead our campaign, and I think I did a pretty good job of that. No, but he was very impressive out there. JSN also was very impressive and looking like he's going to take a year 2 leap. So there was a lot of star power from both sides at the receiver position this week.
This just hit me. This may have been a joint practice between the two teams in the league that have easily the number 1 and number 2 most talented wide receiver 4s in the league. Like Jake Bobo is Traylon Burks, we can debate. And he looked like a very, very talented wide receiver 4 in this joint practice. He had a great couple of days, but Jake Bobo, I don't think there's any debate, is an outrageously talented receiver to not be a starting receiver. Like he needs to be a starter soon. And I know like Tyler Lockett is not long for this NFL world. DK Metcalf, you never know with his contract situation. JSN is coming on. Regardless of what happens with the 2 older guys, JSN and Jake Bobo are going to make a really nice 1-2 that you need to find a third for. And I think if next year it's DK, Jake Bobo, and JSN, I might like that better than I like what their current top 3 is.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of people in my mentions saying God had to nerf this guy somehow, and they gave him a 4.940. So I guess that's where
that's right.
That's where
he tested horrible. So bad. Keon Coleman truthers are looking to Jake Bobo as their savior. Please, correct. God, can Jake Bobo happen to Keon Coleman?
I think that, he's
that's
a
me,
guy that,
I'm one of those truthers.
We know. People who on the show, we know.
Yeah.
I think he really surprised a lot of people with his size in going up against even like it wasn't like a JSN where maybe he was going up against some of the cornerback 5s and 6s of the Titans this week. He was going up against a Robert Javier and a Shaheem Carter, and
going up against a Gabe aneurysm Lily. A lot of
he's going up. Well,
which
DK Metcalf and JSN going up against Gabe aneurysm Lily.
Gabe aneurysm Lily.
But I would say
that's our buddy Terry. We'll
go into that later. But I would say that Jake Bobo was going up against Roger McCreary, who I think, you have to put some respect on Jake Bobo's name to go up against a Titans starter and do what he did out there today. It's really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just realized I didn't even finish my thought. I mentioned Jake Bobo's name and then went total squirrel. I want to talk about Jake Bobo. It's fine. I did the same thing. My point was that DK Metcalf, Jake Bobo, these receivers on the Seattle side of the ball were made to look better than I think ultimately they are, not to disparage them in any way, but they were going up against, again, the Titans starting slot cornerback and then all backups. You were missing Cheeto Uzia, you were missing L'Jarius Sneed. That's a really big deal. And with the starters on the Seahawks side of the ball, who we're going to talk about later, Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, they had, in my opinion, two very different camps, and that matchup was fascinating. Which we can keep teasing things, I know, but I want to keep it general here, and then we'll get into the specifics. Having those two out there was a big deal for the Titans receivers. I think it would have been the same case for the Seattle receivers if the Titans' top 2 outside corners had been out there. But again, it's not excuse making. I think that's just the context that's necessary to point out. Yes, bottom line, Seattle had the better 2 days. They looked like a team that was further along. And I would say those two teams, on just in terms of talent on paper, look relatively evenly matched. Yeah,
I would say so from top to bottom. Talking on Seattle Sports Talk today, it seems like they have a lot of the same questions about their defense and like how they're like with the offensive line. How is that going to look? Their interior linebacking position could use some help. It was a lot of similar parallels to what this Titans team has. Same deal with how they've built their team, new head coach, kind of new staff that they put in there, similar defensive schemes that they're putting in. It was a very even match. And so when we talk about, both these teams kind of going head to head and looking pretty similar, that's probably why they're kind of being made the same sort of way.
And Glory Day Sports in the comments asking if Lockett was held out. Yeah, he was not out there. I actually didn't inquire about. Did we know? Was he injured? Is it veteran?
Lockett was out there. Like he was
today.
In pads.
He was.
Yeah, he was out there. He's been out there the entire week. He just kind of stands on the side.
Veteran reps. So. Okay, yeah, not taking reps. Got it. Okay, just some general notes from today. And JT, if you have anything from today or from yesterday, let's empty the note bag right here. The Titans' first team period. Titans offense, Seahawks defense is what I was watching at the top of today's practice. Some impressive catches to start, a bounce back situation for the Titans offense after yesterday. You had a Levis completion to Burks across the middle. He kind of torched Devon Witherspoon, which is a recurring theme. You'll realize Mason Rudolph had a couple of really nice tosses in that period as well. He hit Jaquan Jackson on an intermediate route, which was a bobbled catch, but he came down with that. And then Rudolph hits, of all people, Steven Stylianos, tight end legend, Titans legend Steven Stylianos on a crosser where, to Stylianos' credit, he got crushed immediately. I mean, it was one of those hospital balls across the middle. Got put on his butt the second he caught it, and he held on. So that was impressive. And then after that strong start, they get into 7-on-7 red zone drills. Got kind of miserable for the Titans. I don't know if there was a single completion in that period. Again, Titans offense, Seahawks defense. Levis had an incompletion to Pollard in the end zone, and then he had an end zone interception to Tariq Woolen, which was intended for Chig, was never really had a prayer. And then Mason Rudolph had an incompletion in the middle of the end zone, and then a short dump off to Spears, and Willis didn't do anything that made me want to write it down, apparently, because I didn't write anything down when I watched that. So a tough period there. Then I'm just going to continue on with my notes here. Red zone 11-on-11s. You get the full team in there, switching this time to the Titans defense and the Seahawks offense. And this is the period where I went to the defense. JT, I know you watched the Titans offense. We'll get to your notes on the offensive side of the ball. But for the Titans defense, there was an awesome one-hander touchdown from Jake Bobo, from Geno Smith to Jake Bobo in the corner of the end zone over Gabe Judy Lawley. A coverage sack of Sam Howell at one point. Jalen Harrell and Rashad Weaver, they were the edge twos in that group, just for folks wondering where the depth chart situation is there. You had Elijah Molden, how should I say, not running particularly high in the depth chart, and we have some thoughts on Elijah Molden later on in the show. And then, man, Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, just smack talk machines. They did not stop talking for 2 days straight. They were just yapping the whole time at the Seahawks sideline, which was electric, and I loved it. And we'll hear from Quandre Diggs in the show later about all that smack talk. Then they played kind of a situational back and forth where both sides of the ball on both teams came together, and it was letting one offense go until they got stopped, and then the other offense could go, or an interception, whatever, just going back and forth like a real game. The Seahawks had an interception pretty early on. Devon Witherspoon jumped the first pass by Will Levis, jumped the route against Kinsey, intercepted the ball. Whole defense goes crazy, immediately ran the ball to Jamal Adams, Titans safety. Jamal Adams handed him the ball. Jamal wanted nothing to do with it. That was a tough moment for the Titans offense, but then they bounce right back. Chance Campbell intercepts, I believe it was Sam Howell in at the time, intercepted Howell across the middle of the field. So a couple of turnovers there. Those are all my notes from today, just in terms of people wanting to know the specifics. JT, what were your notes from the past 2 days that stuck out to you?
Yeah, kind of sitting on those, the kind of same things that you just said about today's practice first, talking about those. The offense, like you said, both of them had their moments. There were times where both offenses looked like they couldn't get anything done, and then there were times where they were just able to run right down the field, whether it was the 1, 2s, or 3s. So that was being able to see a little bit more offense from both sides, what I think was a nice thing, not seeing so many dump offs, just like right to, 3 or 4 yards down the field instead of kind of airing it out was a breath of fresh air that we needed today. Like you said, Treylon Burks had a nice catch. Jaquan Jackson also had a very nice route, I believe, with Mason Rudolph in there. He had a similar style of route that Treylon Burks ran today for a big gain, which I think was very impressive. I think if we go back to the running game of the Tennessee Titans, Tyjae Spears had the run of the day early on in camp. He ripped off a pretty big run. How far that run would have gone, really, I'm not sure, but he did get through with the help of the Tennessee offensive line. And then that's something I really wanted to harp on today. It seemed like the Tennessee Titans offensive line, the one specifically, had a rough go of it yesterday. And I wanted to pay close attention to what they were doing, specifically Peter Skoronski and Lloyd Cushenberry. And when we talked about Peter Skoronski yesterday, kind of getting bodied by Leonard Williams in one-on-ones, and Lloyd Cushenberry, starting to maybe look at, maybe hitting a panic button on him and not being able to even put a single rep on one-on-ones together, even though it is really a defensive sided drill. Not being able to really show anything in those drills was a little bit concerning, but he comes out today. Both of them, Peter Skoronski, I think, looked a lot better, a lot more grounded in his technique and what he was doing. Lloyd Cushenberry started putting some reps together, stacking those up in one-on-ones and then also in team drills. I thought he had a little bit of a better day. And then J.C. Latham versus Leonard Williams was the matchup of the day, both in one-on-ones and then as it continued into team drills. That was kind of the catalyst of all of today's scrappiness, the intensity that was brought, the fighting that was almost there, but not really, because
I got a mental screenshot of Leonard Williams doing this right here. He was cocked and ready to just let one fly, which, again, for the millionth time, the dumbest thing football players do is punch each other in the helmet. Such a bad idea. Such a terrible idea for your hands.
I mean, to be fair, now that they have like the Guardian caps, maybe it's a little softer, but
you're
still
hurting the guy in the helmet with your fist. You're never doing
it. Should be good to note that we talked a little bit earlier this week about how the New England Patriots kind of put in a rule that was, if the veterans, or if the starters start the fight, you're going to have to play the entirety of the preseason game. And if you are a guy on the second or third team looking to get a spot on this roster and you start that fight, you're not going to play at all. And so it sounded like that was the rule that was implemented into practice this week for both teams. And so maybe that's why Leonard, kind of knew he was ready. He was ready to punch. And then all of a sudden he said, "Oh man, I'm gonna have to play this entire preseason game this week." And he put his hand down. But those two started in one-on-ones. J.C. Latham really looked like a rookie against Leonard Williams, who kind of in that drill was unstoppable this week. Both Peter
Rand Carthon had to separate them, by the way.
J.C. Latham, they were kind of getting beat this week by Leonard Williams in that drill. And then when it escalated into the team period, that's where you started to see a lot of fighting and a lot of talking. And so finally they were able to kind of separate the two sides, and then they continued to talk, and that's where Rand Carthon started to get into the mix, and he gets between the two and says, "Guys, we're out here practicing. Stop." He's trying to make peace, which I think is a
he knew the rule. He knew the rule. He's like, "JC, no, I don't want you out there for the full preseason game. I got to protect my first round pick. Get him out of there."
I do think it's an interesting thing. I can't remember another time where a GM would go out there like that.
That's such a J-Rob move, dude. That's such a J-Rob move. Generally, no. Generally, you're right. That's not the case. John Robinson loved to play coach, which was, like, in hindsight, something that I think we were all critical of. Like, hey, let the GM be the GM, let the coaches be the coach. Rand Carthon, I think, does a good job of separating himself, but sometimes you need to step in when you're the head honcho. Sometimes you got to get in there. I was talking to, I think it was Nick Suss after the practice about that rule. Do you think, because somebody asked us, like, that he had to be, like, that rule must be flexible, right? Because if Will Levis goes in there and throws punches, they're not making him play the whole game. And I was like, listen, man, when you're a new coach, you have to. Like, you cannot as a new head coach put that rule out there. Right. You can't set the precedent that you're a squish and that you don't actually mean what you say. And so what I think he does is you say that rule in the team meeting, right? Like, guys, veterans, if you fight, you're playing the whole game. Backups, if you fight, you're not seeing the field. And then you have a list in your pocket. It's okay. Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Jeffrey Simmons. Can I see the following guys after class? And you go, fellas, please, I'm begging you, just don't do it. Don't make, because I'm gonna have to. I will have to play you.
Or
I don't want to. Please, for the love of God, don't fight. Don't freaking fight.
Right before the game, Will Levis with an illness, not going to be able to go today or something like that.
Right.
I
think actually his car battery this morning. I heard it was, so he couldn't get here.
Couldn't get here today.
Right.
Kenneth asked an interesting question.
Coach cuts his brake lines in the night. Goes over to Will Levis's house and cuts his brake lines.
Kenneth asks, what was the most concerning thing you saw from either side of the ball this week? And I think that's a discussion that we can maybe table as we get into our more offensive focused discussion and defensive focused discussion.
Right.
I think it's hard because both sides, there are things that you're not hitting the panic button on, but there are things that just made you feel uneasy. Like, I still just feel very uneasy with the way they roll out Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons from the first day of practice. The way that JSN and DK Metcalf were able to absolutely just exploit those guys was something I was not a fan of. I still have my questions about the offensive line.
Right.
I think we're starting to see J.C. Latham look more and more like a rookie, and the expectations for him, I think, need the brakes pumped a little bit.
Which, again, I hate that. I hate that we're talking about like, oh, he's regressing. That's a narrative regression. Like that, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's purely narrative based. He is not regressing in any actual way out there. It's just now we're actually seeing him go up against other guys and not Bertha and Olga, the blocking sleds.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're seeing the natural trials and tribulations of a rookie tackle. So I really hope people are patient and understanding with that situation, that if you had higher hopes for him out of the gate, that's on you. That's not anything that he has done. Like, you are being the unreasonable one, if that makes sense. Not you in particular, JT, but if folks think that.
And that's my whole point. I think we're going to continue to see more and more of this. And if people get to week 1 and like Montez Sweat or whoever's playing on the outside for Chicago gets after him and beats him 2 or 3 times, and people start hitting the panic button, I think we're going to have to come on here and be like, guys, you are setting your expectations too high. This is not, you're not getting a Pro Bowl guy to like sit in there. And as A says in the comments, he doesn't look like Dillard or Daly. We're not saying that. We're
that's a very important. I'm glad you asked, A, because that's an important distinction.
We're setting the expectations for him to look like he does right now, which is a rookie. He's going to get beat because he is brand new to the NFL. It's going to have a learning curve. He's not going to go out there and look like a Pro Bowl left tackle. We think that he can get to that level. That's what we've said all along, but he's not going to start off that way. He's not out there every single day looking like the turnstile that was Andre Dillard. We're not getting out of camp, I would say, with people coming out with the conclusion that Byron Murphy or Leonard Williams just absolutely ate all day, 17 sacks or whatever it was. Like, that's not what we're getting. It's just there are times here that JC, it looks like a rookie, and you look at him take that rep and you say, that's just going to come with time. Those are things that he's going to learn over the course of an NFL season.
Yeah, here's the difference with Dennis Daly or Andre Dillard. It was their worst plays were awful, 0 resistance. Their best plays were serviceable, like just fine. And you had far more bad plays than good plays. With JC Latham, it is the worst plays. He gets beat pretty bad. And the best plays, he looks like a stalwart franchise cornerstone tackle. So you're seeing the upside, you're seeing the flashes, and it's truly like a 50-50 thing. It is not where it's like, wow, 90% of the snaps today were truly a disaster from Andre Dillard. That is not the case at all. So I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah, to answer Kenneth's question, like you said, I think we're going to answer it throughout the discussion today as we go position by position, because we are going to go position by position today and cover everything from these joint practices. What I'll say is my running metaphor of the dashboard of this team. It's not, as Kenneth asks, what was the most concerning thing? It's not that there's any one light on my dashboard that is flashing red, but there are a handful that are yellow. Like the check engine light is on.
It's like the gas tank.
Your manual.
When you're under like 50 miles and the gas tank comes on, I feel like that's where you are.
Yeah, it's a yellow consult manual button. It's not a stop your car immediately and call AAA button. So we'll discuss each position group. And like you mentioned, like you mentioned in the pre-show meeting, against my will, let's play this first clip from today. It is of Will Levis and the Mayo fume that he released. I don't have any thoughts on this besides I thought it was funny. I wish this was something that we were doing in May, because this is like good off-season fodder. In middle of August, I'm not super interested in discussing this, but it is for a good cause. So here's Will Levis on his Will Levis number 8 Parfum de Mayonnaise.
I was gonna say, it's like, it would be a nice thing in May, but it's like, if we want to cover what Will Levis said at the podium, it's hard not to include this when literally 75% of what Will Levis said at the podium were questions asked.
Well, and that's an indictment on those of us in the media, isn't it? Because
we have to play better. We got to coach better.
People. Yeah,
I think that's what we have to do here.
Add
but
to the TV,
I mean,
folks,
he did bring it upon himself. So here is the clip.
Okay.
But it's gonna be probably set up there for everyone to see as much exposure as we can get there. But it was a pretty cool moment to share that yesterday. Had a lot of fun with it, and it was received pretty well. So he's getting.
And so that is his perfume. I as we go into perfume review time with producer.
Tell me how it smells, JT. So we can move.
Very lemony.
Okay.
I would say that the lemony, the textures in it. I don't know how to review perfume, but he sprayed us all. The perfume notes.
Review like a wine.
I do find it interesting that they're still kind of feeling this out. As I told you yesterday, someone in the media, he said it was going towards a good cause, and someone in the media asked what exactly that cause is, and Will goes, "We haven't figured that out yet."
We found out today. He didn't know. He just forgot
okay.
yesterday. Yeah, they Robbie with Titans PR came out and made an announcement that he didn't want to say the wrong thing. It is for Special Olympics of Tennessee, and I think it's called youth villages. I think is what it's called. It's youth villages. I'm pretty sure it's like a halfway house for kids that are in the foster care system. So 2 good causes. And I don't even know if you can buy it still. I think it's sold out now again.
I think they do a drop of it every single day. Like they have
a
limited
until
supply.
The end of time. Are they just gonna? Is Hellman's going to?
Would you like me to look this up? Let me see. Yeah, Hellman's.
Oh, gosh. Is Hellman's stock going to rise like GameStop suddenly because of a perfume industry that they've latched onto? Perhaps.
Maybe. I have no idea. So.
We've spent far too much time on this. Let's move on to the skill position players, if you don't mind, while you're looking up whether you can buy the perfume or not. Hey, here's the hottest take I'm going to drop today. The wide receiver sweepstakes is over. It's a wrap. This is not like I'm claiming I'm first on it, because a handful of folks I think have come to this conclusion as well, because it's pretty evident out there. But there are a number of folks that are still going to talk about this like it's a competition between now and roster cutdown day. I'm here to tell you it's not. As of 4:39 p.m. on August 15th, this Thursday, it's a wrap. The Titans are keeping 6 receivers, and their names are DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and Jaquan Jackson. That's the list. Those are the guys making the team. Condolences to Kearis Jackson and Kyle Phillips and Mason Kinsey and Sam Schnee and Bryce Oliver, all the guys. I think that's the entire wide receiver room I just named. All of those folks, I apologize. Jaquan Jackson's the dude. It's not necessarily any of your doing. Just Jaquan got drafted and he has impressed, and he does enough things to make this team. And that's exciting. I think Titans fans should be cautiously optimistic about their 6th round draft pick, who JT, you and I and Zach and Stoney, the day of in the moment when that pick was made, we kind of panned it as a, what? There were other receivers on the board right here you could have taken, and you go with this guy who we've not really heard of. He is proving us wrong every day out there at practice, in these practice situation, the team drills, in the preseason games. He's making us look foolish, and I think that is awesome. Let's break this down a little bit. Is he a lock? I would say there's he could in the next 2 weeks lose his spot. It would take him truly playing out of character for the next 2 weeks straight and or getting hurt. But as of right this minute, it is no question he's the 6th guy in, and it is because he is going to be both a useful asset, genuinely useful, not in many snaps in the game. I really couldn't get that one out, could I? Not like for a lot of the game. He's not going to be playing a ton of snaps at wide receiver out there, but I think he will be getting game day looks and like a designed target or 2 on the offense. And then as a returner, he's going to be your dude. Like that versatility, both the way that he can be deployed as an F in multiple different positions on the field offensively in their scheme, and the fact that he's a returner par excellence, or I think that he can be a returner par excellence, to be fair. That's going to win him the spot. The guys that were in the running are of varying degrees out of it. I think that Kyle Phillips getting hurt today, another hamstring injury, which I hate for him. I am not trying to make fun of him in any way, but you can't be surprised by that at this point. And I have been maybe the foremost Kyle Phillips defender his entire career as a Tennessee Titan. I have not until this moment really given up on him as a guy that can make the roster. And actually, I still believe him to be the most talented, pure receiver on this team, not named DeAndre, Tyler, Treylon, Nick, or who am I missing? Calvin. Like those 5 guys, I think that he is easily the 6th most talented pure receiver today. Now, I think Jaquan Jackson might pass him up by the end of the year because he's developing at a really impressive rate. But as of right now, I think that he's still that guy. The problem, as we've said a million times, is that Kyle Phillips is way, way, way too singular a player. He is a slot-only, fragile player who is still consistently demonstrating issues as a potential returner. So that combination of can't rely on him to make the correct mental or physical decision on return duty, and the fact that he can't stay healthy, it's just an non-starter. So I don't think that I think that his campaign to make this roster as of today is dead, and I think that Jaquan Jackson's campaign to make the roster as of today is greenlit. I think it's a wrap. JT, am I jumping to conclusions here?
I agree with you. This is something that I came into the week wondering if it was truly over, just by the way that they've talked about him. And, you go into the way that they use the capital on him, it's really hard when you draft a guy like that to justify keeping him off the roster.
Right.
And so when Brian Callahan says 6 guys up on game day, you're really just, you put the pieces together of the puzzle, and that's where you end up. And I think this week kind of reinforce that. The only guy that I think could give him a run for his money right now is Mason Kinsey, but this is a tried and true thing that we've seen every single year.
Same position, by the way. I think you're right.
I think the way that they've used Mason Kinsey out there is really interesting, and by with him playing up there with Will Levis, that connection is not nothing. Like him being out there with those guys is certainly something. Like I'm not, like we said, it's nothing, it's something, it's everything. I'm not saying it's nothing, but it is definitely something. And if there's a guy that can give him the run for the money, it's going to be Mason Kinsey. And so I wouldn't be surprised this week, especially on kickoff return and punt return, if we see a really healthy dosage of Mason Kinsey. And if he's able to kind of produce the way Jaquan Jackson did last week, then I think we can come back to this conversation. But until then, I think you're right. The way that Jaquan Jackson has flashed and the way they've used him as well, it's coming down to those two, with Jaquan pretty comfortably in the driver's seat.
Well, and the logic here was that in game 1 of the preseason, you saw a lot of Jaquan and a lot of Kearis Jackson, both of the Jacksons as returners. And then in game 2, you're probably going to see a lot of Mason Kinsey and a lot of Kyle Phillips as the returners. Now with Phillips injured, I'm not sure. I'm with you that Mason Kinsey is definitely going to get some run. And if you consult the Titans unofficial depth chart so far, I believe Mason Kinsey is still listed as your number 1 punt returner, which he did a lot of last season and has experience with. Is he more talented at it than I think Jaquan Jackson can be? No, I think Jaquan can be a better returner than him. Is he a serviceable returner? Absolutely he is. He is a trustworthy, serviceable returner. Regularly got more juice for the squeeze than I think you were expecting, given the Titans fans' very, very, very low expectations for their punt returners recently. So I'm with you, and I think folks that have listened to our show in the past couple of episodes are wondering, well, what happened to Kearis Jackson? I thought it was Jaquan or Kearis. I'm still on the train of I feel bad for Kearis, because I think if Jaquan did not get drafted, he would be the 6th guy, simply because I think his returner ability makes him that dude. But I've had some people challenge me on whether or not the Kearis love is really warranted. I was talking to our buddy, our buddy Sam today over at A to Z about this, and Phelan was saying he doesn't get it with Kearis. I'm not nearly as low on him as Sam is, and some others are. But I will admit that outside of his returning ability, he does leave a lot to be desired as a receiver. I still think there's room for development there, and that's part of the reason why I'd love to see him on an active roster, and I think it's a shame he can't be on one. But he's not reliably in the right place. He tends to drift on routes. You think back through the practices, he doesn't have many impressive team period 7 or 11s plays that come to mind. He never really makes a play out there outside of one-on-ones on occasion. So I get that. I'm with you. I think it's Mason Kinsey that might give him a run for his money, but at this clip, I'm not sure there's anything that Mason Kinsey can do about it. So I had written down who do we feel the most bad for because they're missing out. I'd say it's Mason Kinsey because I think he has made a leap this offseason, but it's going to be too little too late.
Yeah, and to your point there with Kearis, it just comes down to Kearis Jackson plays, as much as they want to say he's a versatile guy that can play everywhere. Kearis Jackson, for the most part, is going to play on the outside. That's just how his body shape and his structure. That's where, if he is a receiver, that's the place he's going to be most comfortable. And with the guys they already have on this roster in DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks, and WI, you just don't have room for a guy to be a returner and play that more X position. You need a guy in the slot behind Tyler Boyd. And so that's where a guy like Mason Kinsey, or more likely Jaquan Jackson, just fits the puzzle a lot more.
I do think that like these guys are going to go away, and based on, you have some older players on the roster, so you may see more of these practice squad guys this year than frankly you'd like to. Here's an interesting question I had written down. Who becomes who? Because there's like these archetypes we have in our minds of like the Titans Mason Kinsey, the guy that goes crazy in the preseason, barely misses the roster or barely makes the roster, ends up toiling on the practice squad and getting called up in certain situations. I feel like Kyle Phillips is poised to become the new Mason Kinsey, because I think the Titans may move on, or Kinsey might get picked up or something like that. And that's kind of like, it may be his role for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. I think Kearis Jackson is going to be your perpetual backup for Jaquan Jackson if Jaquan goes down on the practice squad. One guy I want to bring up who I don't see any path for him to make the roster, but you and I think Zach were talking about this the other day, and I think it's worth mentioning. Bryce Oliver has some juice. Like, the guy can play. He is a very good third string wide receiver, and he's a UDFA this season. As a young player who is certainly an outside player, has that bigger body, he's looked good in practice. In the preseason game the other night, he had a couple of really nice connections. I think he's a more refined route runner than I would have ever expected from a guy like him. His route pacing is advanced. He uses his size well. I think that he has a future in the league. Now, is he going to make the roster? I think unequivocally, no, he is not. But best case for him, realistic, could be like an NWI track where he's a UDFA, spends a year developing. Maybe next year or 2 years from now, he gets that bump up into the active roster, takes a big leap, or by necessity, he plays some regular season snaps because they call him up and folks are impressed. And he becomes kind of that NWI, inimitable, nobody receiver who's like, that's too mean, nobody, but like the kind of no-name, bland receiver that goes out there and does the dirty work, very blue-collar vibe. But gosh darn it, you want them on your team because the coaches love them. They practice hard, and they do make some impressive catches.
Yeah, and Jacob says in the comments here, out of the outside looking in guys, Kinsey, Kearis Jackson, Oliver, and Phillips, who's the priority to retain on the practice squad? I would not be surprised if Oliver is one of their major priorities this go around. He has looked really good.
I think they like to keep all 4 of those guys. I really do.
I think they would, but you only get 15, 16 spots. It'd be really hard to keep 4 guys on that practice squad. But I would not be surprised out of those 4 if it ends up being a Mason Kinsey and a Bryce Oliver, or like you said, if Mason Kinsey doesn't make the roster and ends up getting picked up finally somewhere else, I think it probably is Kyle Phillips and Bryce Oliver. Those are your 2, just because he's both kind of had a connection and is that kind of safety blanket for Mason Rudolph and Malik Willis. He's been that guy where they're able to work on things with those quarterbacks really well. He's been that serviceable guy in practice to be that role. So I think those 2 are definitely the ones they decide to keep on the practice squad.
All right, so that's the discussion at the bottom of the Titans depth chart for receiver. Phillips, his campaign is dead. Jaquan Jackson, congrats, you're on the team as of today. Let's go to the top of the wide receiver depth chart real quick. And Calvin Ridley had an interesting couple of days. It was a strange dynamic because pretty much the entirety of these joint practices, you had Seahawks outside corner Rick Woolen covering Calvin Ridley. And for most of it, you had their other big name cornerback that folks know, Devon Witherspoon, covering Treylon Burks. And they were both kind of mismatches. Rick Woolen was big and physical and gave Calvin Ridley a really tough couple of days. And Treylon Burks was big and physical and gave Devon Witherspoon a tough couple of days. I think both matchups were mismatches and left us with kind of a funhouse mirror image of those 2 receiver and cornerback groups. I think that Calvin Ridley was made to look a lot worse than he is. I think Treylon Burks was probably made to look worse than, or better than he is, although one could put on the rose-colored glasses and say Treylon Burks is just him now. Don't even worry about it. He's him. I don't know about that for sure, but man, the number one thing that those two matchups left me thinking about was, how would this have looked different if DeAndre Hopkins was out there? How would the Seahawks, if this was a game, not even just a practice, but a game, how would they have deployed those cornerbacks? And I think you would have seen Riq Woolen as much, if not more, on a DeAndre Hopkins, because if you kept him on Ridley all day, you're probably shutting down Ridley for the most part. But I don't know who's covering DeAndre Hopkins or Treylon Burks. Like, it's kind of, it becomes a pick your poison situation. And again, while Hopkins may not be the best receiver on this team talent-wise, that may be Ridley. Ridley's limitations from a physicality standpoint against a guy like Riq Woolen, who is very big, and holy cow, is he long. He's like the only player I've ever seen in person that is that freaky long looking, where they're so tall, so lanky, and their knuckles fall down to their knees, just the arms forever, is Caleb Farley. Honestly, like, Caleb Farley has that same build. It's just Caleb Farley's never healthy. So Riq Woolen's kind of like a Caleb Farley build on a big, healthy, talented, confident DB, and it is a scary, scary situation going up against him. But JT, what did you make of the couple of days that Ridley had against Riq Woolen?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that a lot of people called out is Ridley kind of taking ownership of his off day yesterday, but also him talking about how he maybe didn't run as fast as he should have. And I think that was something that was asked today of Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan kind of talked to the point of, like, this isn't really new for these kind of connections between quarterback and wide receiver. They're going to have off days where it just doesn't feel right. And I think that was one of them yesterday for Calvin Ridley. He kind of mentioned the Jamar Chase saga, where people were talking about how Jamar Chase, he can't catch. And then he ended up going crazy that first year. But Calvin Ridley definitely had a tough week. And I don't mean that it is an indictment on Calvin Ridley, just more so he finally, we're seeing our expectations, much like the JC Latham discussion, should kind of maybe be tempered, and we should pump the brakes, because we were talking about Calvin Ridley going up against Gabe Jeudy-Lawley and, a Trey Avery. And now he goes up against a former Pro Bowler and who could be a star this year as well, Riq Woolen, and you see the difference right there. And, Calvin Ridley, I think today got back a little bit at Riq Woolen. He had some success there today, but not a whole lot. And so I think
some, yeah.
Calvin Ridley today, like you said, what would that have looked like with DeAndre Hopkins? I think we would have seen a lot more matchups with Calvin Ridley on Devon Witherspoon, who he had a bounce back day in his own right, but I think it would have been that much more challenging for the young corner as well against Calvin Ridley.
I agree. I have no more thoughts on Ridley. Again, I think he was made to look worse this week than he actually is. And I think when it's Ridley and Hopkins both on the field, there will be some teams that have big physical corners like Riq Woolen who can do a very good job of shutting down Calvin Ridley, and that's going to be something he deals with. But if DeAndre Hopkins is out there, it is going to be truly a pick your poison situation. I'm excited to see how teams deal with that. Moving on to the last receiver here of note, Treylon Burks. Mentioned he had a really fantastic joint practice. He looked good out there, and he made Devon Witherspoon look worse than I think Devon Witherspoon really is. It's just he's a much bigger, more physical player than Devon Witherspoon, and he used that physicality ever since the first preseason game where we were talking about, hey, he ran over a guy. He did the thing in college we've been asking him for 2 years to do. That's good. Let's see more of that. He was doing more of that in these practices, and he has this air of confidence to him that I think is really impressive. Here's a clip from Treylon Burks talking about getting to face some fresh competition, some fresh DBs that he has not seen before during these practices. Here's what he had to say today.
Back in those days, keep making a case.
Their skill set and see who the best man is.
From it off. I'm just being on one page.
Those things have shown up in practice.
It's actually fun just to get to see new looks, see new people, and just go out there and compete and, put my skill set versus their skill set and see who the best man is.
From it off.
All right, now moving on to the run game, just a couple of notes and some clips here from Titans running back Tyjae Spears. You mentioned the run game starting to gel a little bit. I've noticed it gel a little bit. Let's first hear this first clip from Tyjae is about the biggest key for the offense right now is to just get on the same page. And when they have miscues at practice and things don't go right for the offense from getting to your landmarks, being on time, all of those things, the biggest culprit right now is guys just not being on the same page. Here's what he said.
I'm just being on one page. Yeah. Just being on one page, and like that's why we got film studies, and that's why we got times out here with like heated moments, like to understand like some of our flaws. But at the end of the day, I'm really not a coach, so I can't really, you know what I'm saying, speak from all them different perspectives.
Tajay, this
We then asked him about the run game in particular and those running backs working in tandem with the offensive line, starting to find their groove a little bit, which we'll give our thoughts on in a moment. But here's what he had to say about the communication between the running backs and the linemen.
Just communication, man. It's just our communication. And it starts in protection, you know what I'm saying? It starts in protection to make sure, you know, we're the straight. Like, we always, you know, we talking like, hey, bro, what is this? What this look is? And, like, what that look is. And it starts in, like, you know, with the protection piece. And also, you know, we let them know, like, we trust in them. And, like, also, like, if somebody missed a block or we missed a cut, like, you know what I'm saying, we tell them, like, we believe in you. You know what I'm saying? We believe in y'all, and I know they believe in us. So it's just that communication with that belief system just going to, you know, help us skyrocket.
Is there
And then finally, I asked Tyjae Spears about this time of year. You're learning a new offense. Talk me through that process of stopping thinking as you're out there, having to think about what you're doing, and knowing the offense like the back of your hand, things being second nature to you. Are you seeing that progress every day, or do you feel like you're getting to that point? Here's what he had to say on that front.
Starting to flow, you know what I'm saying? Like what you learn in the offense on court, like, you know, like should I do that? Like now it's starting to flow, and you getting into the back end of camp, like, you know, all these new things that we put in. Okay, like we done heard these things before. Now it's starting to flow. Now your natural ability is starting to come out.
Seems like so.
Okay, now I'm gonna leave this to you, JT. Give the folks your thoughts on what the run game has looked like the last 2 days. Apparently my wife is locked out of our house. So while you talk about that, I'm going to go let her in and I'll be right back.
Yeah. So the run game, I think, continues to be something of a 50-50 split. Like we said, Coach Callahan yesterday talked about, you know, he's never seen two running backs like Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard, A, be so productive in the pass blocking game, and B, you know, be so willing to do that. And I think that's something that has started to translate to this team as well. We talked about earlier this week how much, you know, maybe the Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard split might come down to simply what kind of pass blocking protection they need on that play. And so that's kind of what you saw today as well. Tyjae got a little bit more of the run with, you know, downhill carrying the ball, and Tony Pollard was used a lot more in the passing game. And I think we're starting to see that tandem where the Titans, in Brian Callahan specifically, may have a situation on their hand where you have two guys who can do it all, and being able to kind of switch up that tempo and ride the hot hand, where Tyjae may have a little bit more speed and elusiveness and Tony Pollard might have that power. It's to kind of prove dividends and pay off for this offense. And once we get to the games where you are able to kind of interchange that, I think that's kind of that ebb and flow that Tyjae is talking about there between him and Tony, being able to kind of do the same thing, but offer slightly different elusiveness versus power that's going to really stump defenses.
I agree with everything you just said, even though I only heard half of it.
And do you even have your headphones in?
I do. I do hear you.
Oh, they're Bluetooth. Yes. Okay.
I do.
I got you.
I apologize if you already said this, but my 2 cents on this were, if you had asked me the state of the Titans' new run game, no Derrick Henry, brand new offensive line, 2 new-ish running backs, like, what does that look like? How do we feel? If you'd asked me that last week, certainly 2 weeks ago, I'd have said, I don't know, man. It may be kind of tough sledding and not nearly as potent as you're used to. And then today, I would say I'm a lot more optimistic about it. I don't think it's going to be the Derrick Henry of old, pound the rock between the tackles. There we go. And, you know, picking
a little
up
bit
4,
out of
5,
breath
6,
from getting up
6,
those stairs right there.
I did run the stairs very fast. I'm a little bit out of breath. Please excuse me. I'm a peak athlete. I swim the 1500. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm more encouraged today than I was certainly the last 2 weeks about them being serviceable, and they are doing things differently than the Titans did when they had Derrick Henry, which they should be doing. A lot of different looks. I think the run game scheme from Bill Callahan in particular, I saw folks that were breaking down the all 22 in the preseason, which I typically break down 22, just go through it during the regular season. I'll be honest, hand up on this. Can't quite be bothered to do that with the preseason games myself. When we get to the real football, I'll be doing that. But other folks who did it, and I applaud them, were pointing out, hey, look at this trap wham. Like, they're doing some cool things. That's super cool. Excited about that. So I think that's trending in the right direction for sure. So that's the run game. Before we get to the offensive line and the defense to wrap things up, should we do the giveaway? We are now almost 1 full hour in. I think we've left the people waiting long enough to find out.
We
who
went
gets
on
to
way
join.
too long about Jake Bobo. So
we did. We did spend like 5 minutes on Jake Bobo. So somebody's about to join us on Saturday evening to watch the Titans and the Seahawks in the club level. We've got a handful of names in there. I guess without further ado, JT, who is the person that's going to be joining us? Drum roll, please. The winner?
I picked one out and I folded it this time for more suspense.
Oh, wow. Who is our winner?
John Alice.
John Alice. Congratulations to John Alice. I think that was an Instagram entry, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yes.
All right, so John Alice, big ups to you. Hopefully you are listening to this, because if you are, we'll be reaching out to you in short order to find out whether or not you still want to join us for the game.
And like we said, if you're in line, stay in line.
That's right. There's a chance that if we don't hear from John Alice between now and, I don't know, tomorrow morning or something, we may have to redraw for the next person. But thank you to everyone that entered. John Alice, looking forward to watching the game with you on Saturday evening, and we'll be in contact with how to hook up with us, and it's going to be a good time. So thanks to all of you guys for entering and following us on socials and all of those things. Hopefully we'll have more giveaways to do like this in the future, because this is very fun and we enjoy getting to watch some ball with some true ball knowers, like those of you that watch the Hot Read podcast. Okay.
Pulling it out of a bag. So
it seems to be your favorite activity. Yeah. The offensive line is our next topic here. I want to talk about the state of the depth chart. Again, just giving kind of an update on what the 53-man roster is going to look like. 4 of the 5 positions are locked at this point. I think, again, this is not super new information, but I just want to go ahead and put the line in the sand right here on August 15th. Hey, your left tackle, left guard, center, right tackle. Those positions are locked in. It is J.C. Latham. It is Pierce Skoronski. It is Wood Cushenberry. It is Nicholas Petit-Frere. Nobody's fighting them for those positions. The only one that is still somewhat up in the air is that right guard position, and it is really a 2-man race, right? It is Andrew Rupchich and Dylan Radins. JT, am I speaking out of turn in saying it's just those two? I think it is just those two. Dylan Radin's still the leader in the clubhouse.
It's those two. Yep.
Right. Dylan Radin's still getting the primary share of those snaps. But again, going back to the tape grinders from the first preseason game, a lot of positive things about Rupchich in his first game. Didn't really put any bad reps out there. I don't know, JT, did you? I'll be honest, I didn't pay attention a ton to their like snap share these 2 joint practice days. Did you happen to catch wind of?
It's really hard when I'm trying to like look at both fields. I wasn't doing much of the snap share count. I know in one-on-ones, Andrew Rupchich has looked pretty impressive, and as well as Dylan Radins. Those guys have both looked strong. I think Dylan Radins has looked the stronger of the 2. I think it's going to be an interesting for Bill Callahan to make. It'll really be interesting to see who, actually ends up playing this weekend, right? I think we might see a healthy dosage of Andrew Rupchich. That's probably my guess.
I think we're going to. Yep. I think it's going to be a lot of Andrew.
That's where we're going to see
one good, fair, long look, right?
And then, once we get after that game, I think we can reevaluate. But I think, like I said last week, I think we still firmly stand at J.C. Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Radins, NPF as your starting line going into week 1.
Okay, so we're agreed on that front. The last offensive line note I have, and this is maybe my second strongest take of the day, the most concerning offensive lineman on the Titans team right now, based purely on what we've seen in the preseason and at camp, is not who you'd think. I think it's Lloyd Cushenberry. I don't think it's really arguable that it's Lloyd Cushenberry. Yes, you could argue, hey, the right guard situation, since we don't know which guy it actually is yet, that's more concerning. But in terms of an individual lineman, I don't see how it's not Lloyd Cushenberry. And I like Lloyd Cushenberry. I hope that I'm wrong about this, and this is just a product of weird off-season things. But when I think about every guy that is either a starter or contending for a starter position on this offensive line, between 11 on 11s, just down there in the pit with the O-line versus the D-line, one-on-ones against those 2 groups, I can think of a couple of positive reps that I have seen and mentally banked for all of them. I can't really think of a standout rep for Lloyd Cushenberry. Can you, JT?
And that kind of goes back to our, I don't know how much credit we want to give to like one-on-one specifically.
Right. It's defensive slanted drill. And maybe he's a specific type of player where it's just like, with Aaron Brewer, for example, one-on-ones were not his thing. He wasn't big. There's a reason he's the center. He's got two guys on the other side of him. Doesn't need to work laterally. Doesn't need to be the biggest guy. Like, his skill set is elsewhere. With Cushenberry, it's not. I don't view Cushenberry in that Brewer mold of like, well, he's got a very unique skill set. No, he's a big boy. He's a talented player. He should be able to put a rep or two on the field in practice that we all see and be like, hey, there's where you see big money to that center in the free agency market because he's a stud. I haven't had that moment with him yet, and I've been mostly disappointed. Am I being harsh?
I don't want to go too far as say disappointed. I think underwhelmed is
That's a good word for it.
Definitely the word I would go with. I will give him credit today. He did string together a few good reps in one-on-one, nothing that was going to knock your socks off, I would say. I think where he shines is his ability to read protections, focus with the quarterback, and really kind of work as one unit. I know someone else in the football space, Theo Ash, did a really interesting deep dive into Lloyd Cushenberry's performance against the San Francisco 49ers last week, and he had really nice things to say about him working with Skoronski for the most part. So I think that's where you see more of his game, flourish. He's not going to be that over commanding guy who's going to put defenders in the ground like that. But when he's able to work as a tandem with his guards, I think that's where he can really shine.
Yeah. And if you ask me my honest opinion today, it is that I'm not worried about it at this point. I'm not, and I'm not giving up on Lloyd Cushenberry by any means, but I am at the point where I'm mildly concerned about it. And if you ask me who's been the most disappointing at practice so far, to me, it is him, and it's not really close. I interviewed him today, and he's a great interview. He's a good guy. I think that he's sharp as a whip. Sharp as a whip. Whip smart, sharp as a tack. I just combined those idioms. Here's the first clip from him talking about, I asked at this point with this new offensive line, are you able to identify what strengths and weaknesses are? Do you know what you're going to be good at, what you're going to be bad at, or like currently are bad at, needing to work on? And if so, what are some of those things? And here's what he had to say.
We do so many different things in the run game. I think that's going to be a strength. Still growing as a group, protection-wise, and getting everybody on the same page. But I think we have a lot of areas to improve, but we're going to be good.
You're proud of.
So what kind of teacher is Bill Callahan? Is he somebody that throws a million things at you and sees who sinks and who swims? Or is it like every day is today was 101 with Bill Callahan, tomorrow's 102, and then we move on to the 200s. And each day it's a new lesson, a new step on the ladder. Here was his answer to that question.
Misclick.
That's all right. We'll find it again.
Yeah. But at the same time, he does a good job of knowing when to slow things down.
Just a little
we need to be very detailed about certain. We do so many different things in the run game. I think that's going to be a strength. Still growing as a group, protection-wise, and getting everybody on the same page. But I think we have a lot of areas to improve, but we're going to be good.
You're proud of.
Kind of a good mix. Okay. Sometimes he throws a bunch of stuff at us and see how we react. But at the same time, he does a good job of knowing when to slow things down, when we need to be very detailed about certain things. He slows it down, make sure we all understand it, and go from there. But he does a good job of knowing how to balance that thing.
But at this point in camp, you're still going into the meeting room, and he'll throw something that you've not heard before yet.
No, you're right. I asked a follow-up question on the same topic. Please play this.
He'll just throw something completely new at you.
Nothing completely new.
Okay.
I feel like at this point, it helped in the spring OTAs. We started off pretty fast. They threw pretty much everything at us. So everything we need to install, we haven't installed, and now it's just different wrinkles, different adjustments of things he's done in the past or things we're going to see in the future to help us out.
Okay, apologies for accidentally interrupting myself. This final question is from Lloyd Cushenberry on the topic of Will Levis and that connection, just as important for him as being an offensive lineman, a part of the whole. As the center, you have to be the quarterback of the line. You have to be in lockstep with your quarterback and see the field the same way. How is that relationship coming along?
Yeah, it's coming there. It's getting there. Both of us, we're trying to – it's a process. We're going to have bumps in the road, going to have ups and downs, good days, bad days. But by the time we get to week one, I think we'll be on the same page and ready to rock the season.
All right, so that was talking to Lloyd Cushenberry today. And again, I don't mean to start a panic on him. I just have been surprised by how little I have been impressed. That's kind of a convoluted way of saying it, but that's the reality. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball here. Our last clip of the day is from newly acquired safety Quandre Diggs, one of the former Seattle bros back there who was a part of all the smack talk. We asked him today about the incessant smack talking all week long, and here's what he had to say.
Well, I'm going to have you vamp while I go find it.
Okay, he's going to go find it. I'll go ahead and talk about this DB room. It was, like I said at the top of the show, a little bit underwhelming just because you had the top line outside receivers on Seattle going up against Titans backups on the outside. Gabe Jeudy-Lally, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Trey Avery. You did not have you did not have Cheeto Awuzie or L'Jarius Sneed out there, and so that was tough. But an interesting discussion cropped up about Elijah Molden. And are we at the point where we have that clip yet, or should I keep going on this?
I'm working on it.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. If we don't have it, it's fine. We can keep going. The bottom line is they were talking smack a lot. Elijah Molden, like I mentioned at the top of the show, not running super high in the rotation at safety. And we were having this conversation. You were having it with Nick Suss originally.
Found it.
Here we go. Okay, let's play the clip real quick.
Okay.
If y'all could have been in our DB room last year, that's small talk. You feel me? That's just how we talk, you know what I mean? And I miss those guys, love those guys, you know what I mean? And we're gonna get the DB room back, like we're gonna get it back like that here too, you know what I mean? Where you can talk trash, just be yourself, you know what I mean? No need to hold nothing in. If you got something to say it. And you know, y'all know Spoon. You see how Spoon get down, like that's how he is. And all the guys, you know what I mean? So I think that's dope. That's a great, that's a brotherhood for life. What's it been like?
All right, now that we have absolutely nailed that drop, let's move on to the rest of the
Awesome.
DVs here. Yeah, we killed it. Good job, us. Elijah Molden is the 5th string safety right now. Like, we know Amani Hooker, we know Jamal Adams, we know Quandre Diggs are all getting run ahead of him on the safety depth chart. I suppose he's safety 4, but today he was running deeper down than that. Maybe it was just a today thing, but in terms of where they were running out there, it was further down. When you go to the cornerback side of things, we know, okay, so L'Jarius Sneed, it's Cheeto Awuzie, it's Roger McCreary, it's Jarvis Brownlee Jr., and as we talked about on Tuesday, there's a big drop-off. Like, your top 4 cornerbacks are really solid. You love that. And then it's Trey Avery, Gabe Jeudy-Lally, Robert Javier. Things are tough. Tay Gowan. I forget about Eric Garrett. Tay Gowan, right, is also on this team.
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, things get tough. And so it was Nick, I believe, who originally posed the question. Is Elijah Molden the Titans' 5th best cornerback? And is he better serving this team at cornerback, depending on the personnel they roll out there, the packages they have, and or the reality of their injuries and who's next up? I think the answer might be yes.
I would say so. If you're considering when it gets to roster cut down day and you're looking at the safety and cornerback room, and it's a discussion between keeping guys like Shaheem Carter, Eric Garrett, which I think he does make the roster, but Eric Garrett, Trey Avery, Gabe Jeudy-Lally, like those guys, and you have somebody else that you really want to keep on this roster, is there an argument to be made that even though it sucks for the guy, being Elijah Molden, having to flip-flop continuously the positions he's trying to learn, does it make more sense to keep just Elijah Molden as that guy who can flip-flop between the positions and be that stopgap for you, instead of keeping one of these guys who you know is going to be a reliability come game day? And I think that's the question that the Titans brass is going to have to make when they make these roster cut down decisions. And I for right now, I would believe that if you're looking at all of these guys who can potentially play cornerback in this room, the discussion for CB5 comes down to between Gabe Jeudy-Lally and probably Elijah Molden reverting back to a corner. Like, I think that's the answer.
As an outside player, Gabe Jeudy-Lally is already better than Molden. I think it's pretty fair to say. But as a slot player, it's definitely Molden. It's definitely Molden.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's funny that at the beginning of the training camp, it was, well, Elijah Molden, good thing they're playing him at safety because he's their second best safety. I mean, shoot, he's a starter. And now they went out and they got a pair of former Seahawks DVs back there. And it's like suddenly maybe playing back cornerback, depending on the injury situation and whatnot. I'll put it this way. If you have a situation like you had today in a real game where no L'Jarius Sneed, no Chido Awuzie, who we got in there? Okay, plug in Jarvis Landry Jr. Don't worry about it. Are you keeping keeping so many names, keeping Roger McCreary on the inside and rolling out a Gabe Jeudy-Lally on the outside? Or are you bumping McCreary outside as a starter and bringing in Molden as the inside guy? That's the question that I think is
I'd probably go with the latter. I know a lot of people are liking Gabe Jeudy-Lally. I'm not ready to say that he is cornerback 5 on this team. I know a lot of people were out there today saying that Gabe Jeudy-Lally would be cornerback. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that. I get that he can play the outside.
By default.
I'm not. Yeah, I think it's right, like you said, by necessity, by default. Talent-wise, I'm not ready to have that discussion and agree with that, I would say.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Are you comfortable saying he is a higher on the depth chart than Trey Avery right now, Gabe Jeudy-Lally?
Probably, but it's very close. Like, I'm not saying that one is higher. I would go with the guy who has been burnt less, I guess is the way I would put it.
Yeah, I would box them both in by saying they both fall into the category of if you have to roll them out, I think you're screwed. And that's how I earlier today, by the way, described Molden. I think that he is the worst player on this team, or I'll say on the defense. He's the worst player on the defense who, if you have to roll him out there on a Sunday, I don't think you're totally screwed. Like I go, you can work with this guy. He's the worst in that category. Whereas a Trey Avery and I think a Gabe Jeudy-Lally right now are both guys that are the best players on the team where you roll them out there and I say, you're screwed. Crap. Like, this is a problem. They are that demarcation line is somewhere in between those guys. And so
that's where I would put it too.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to leave it. The last thing is the defensive line. Just some notes on this. Arden Key still running with the ones, which we're both kind of surprised by. People keep asking questions about the process of the PED suspension. It's not been announced. Maybe there's something going on. My understanding, and I don't know how much of this I can say, so I'm going to just say all of it and hope nobody gets mad at me. My understanding is that the appeals process is totally in-house with the NFL. Guys this time of year, like Danico Autry and Arden Key, who are facing those reported third-party reporting suspensions, are actively going through the suspension appeal process that's being arbitrated by the NFL's courts, whoever handles that. And in the history of PED suspension appeals, the number of instances where the appeal has gone through is like 0 or 1. Like, it's I can't. I mean, don't take my word for it. Paul Karski, who's been doing this a million years, and that's his lane, is like this kind of nitty gritty. He can't think of a single time it ever happened. So do not hold your breath that that's going to work. All of that being said, why is he still getting run with the ones? Wouldn't it be kind of foolish to continue to give this guy who you're not going to have for the first month? You're not going to see this guy till mid-October out there on the field for you. And in the meantime, you have to have somebody play with the ones. Like, somebody else has got to play edge. It can't just be Harold Landry out there. So maybe get these guys to run with the twos. Hey, Harold Landry. Hey, Jalen Harrell. Hey, anybody. Thomas Rush, Caleb Murphy, get up here. Like, let's see you go against the big boys and see how it goes. I don't understand why they're not doing that yet. Paul Kaharski posited maybe the fact that they're still running him with the ones is indicative of the fact that they're confident they're going to go get somebody to fill in that role. And so they're not mixing up the order. He's just kind of a placeholder, to which I respond, okay, who? Like, the list is dwindling dramatically. There are no good options as free agents right now.
Signed today. Yep.
Yeah. Carl Lawson being signed today. Your list is short and bad. And I think your best option at this point may genuinely be somebody that gets cut, like a cut candidate. Maybe they're eyeing some cut candidates around the league. I don't know, man. It's weird, and I don't like it.
I mean, by kind of getting to the same exact answer, I think the reason that he's still rolling with the ones is because if you put anybody else up there, they're going to immediately lose.
Looks really bad.
It looks not good. I think that's
hey, that's a theory.
By proxy, then you're going out to go get somebody. So
it's protecting the image of the team. That's what that is. Okay.
Well, it's just I just don't know. Like, none of them have shown anything with the twos,
right,
to really excel them up to the ones. Like, you're not going to put a AA ball player into AAA if he's not looking like, if he's batting 115. Like that's a change of pace, giving him harder competition is not to throw a baseball analogy in there, but that's not going to do anything for you. Right. And so I think that's where we stand with the edge discussion, is that it's getting pretty late into the training camp season, and they still really do not have an answer for the Arden Key suspension.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, that's it for us in terms of running down the joint practices. Hope folks found that informative and entertaining. Finally, before we leave you on this Thursday evening, we have the news with producer JT. JT, what's first?
Yeah, and let's do a speed run here. Bottom line, very little to no starters in preseason week 2 action here. Brian Callahan basically said today that none of the starters, or very little of the starters, will actually start on Saturday, including Malik Willis starting as the quarterback. I think that's an interesting note, and to see how that develops there, how much he will get versus Mason Rudolph. And then also the injuries that Brian Callahan said took place today with the team, starting with Keandre Coburn, who went in early for precautionary reasons. Josh Wiley hit his head early in practice and went in. Cal Phillips, like we said, with the hamstring, and Marlon Davidson with a bicep injury. Bryce Oliver also just went in because of heat issues, but we'll probably see at least Keandre Coburn, Marlon Davidson, and Bryce Oliver maybe out there this weekend with Malik Willis and the second team against the Seattle Seahawks.
All right. And is that... Oh, that's not it. You're just waiting for me to react. This is bad work on my part. I have no thoughts. Actually, I have one thought. I do think that the vibe so far in terms of injury management from this team, and I think it was Zach who was mentioning this earlier today on a football show, so to give proper credit from where I heard this idea, and I agree with it. I think that they are handling injuries this time of year in a smarter, more precautionary fashion than they did in the past. Like Josh Wiley, you hit your head. We're not super concussion protocol-y, but like, there's 30 minutes left to practice. Let's call it a day for you. Hey, Marlon Davidson, you got a bicep. Let's evaluate let's not push guys back out there who think they can keep going with an injury in the preseason training camp, joint practice. Like, let's try to get guys to the starting line before we start pushing guys through injuries. I'm not saying they were doing a ton of that with the Vrabel regime, but if Josh Wiley hit his head a little bit and is like, ouchie, but I'm okay, I think they're putting him back out there. Like, I think it's like, all right, let's dust it off. Hey, Bryce Oliver with heat issues, let's get you some water for a minute and get you back out there instead of letting you go in. Maybe you see that as soft. Maybe that's a thing. But I don't see it as soft. I see it as smart this time of year.
I do as well. And then the final two things here that we have is Jim Wyatt with the Britches report. The Titans will be decked out in light blue jerseys with navy breeches and navy socks in Saturday's preseason game. And then finally, I looked up if you can still get the Will Levis Mayo perfume.
And
in fact, you can. It says on their website right now, it says Will Levis number 8 is sold out for today. The scent of greatness will be restocked tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So
how about
if you're here in Nashville, get on your computers at 9 in the morning and you'll be able to hopefully get a shot at ordering yourself some perfume, I guess, if you want.
Or
that.
don't.
So, or
actually
cologne,
do. I don't want to actively discourage this. It's for a good cause. Go get you some perfume. Some Parfum de Mayonnaise. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Hey, Titans preseason game on Saturday evening. JT and I will be live Sunday afternoon, evening, TBD. Follow us on social media at Hot Read Pod to find out when. But on Sunday in the afternoon, evening period, we will be reacting live to that game. All of our thoughts from Titans Seahawks over the weekend. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following us all across the interwebs. We'll talk to you on Sunday.